Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. Psychological safety is one of those terms that has been fairly popular recently. You may have heard people have conversations or discussions about it. You may have seen research studies or articles being written about it. The bottom line is that psychological safety is a big deal, whether we're talking about the feeling or the experience outside of the workplace or within the workplace. And since this podcast focuses on experiences within the workplace, today we'll talk about psychological safety in the workplace and specifically how it is related to teams. The very basic definition of psychological safety is the belief that one can speak up without being punished for it or without being humiliated as a result of it. Speaking up can be defined as a number of different things, whether that means contributing to a conversation, contributing to a project or an effort, whether that means asking questions or asking for clarification. If there is a sense of psychological safety, an individual will feel just that. They will feel safe enough to contribute or ask questions without the fear of being ridiculed or humiliated or embarrassed in any way. When we consider teams at work, psychological safety can be a big issue, especially when it's lacking. So let's think about, what does psychological safety look like within a team? Well, much like the general definition of psychological safety, any team member should feel safe enough to contribute, to ask questions, to propose new ideas without the fear of being punished or singled out or embarrassed or humiliated in any way. Many people have either experienced or witnessed a lack of psychological safety, especially when it comes to group settings. Think about how many times you or someone else that you know of may have, for example, not asked a question or not asked for clarification on something because they were either embarrassed to do so or because they were convinced that doing so would have some negative consequences. And again, those consequences can be wide and they can range quite a bit, from being made fun of or humiliated or having attention brought to you, a negative type of attention. So again, when it comes to psychological safety, and specifically in the setting of teams, it's critical that each team member feels that safety to contribute, to ask, to inquire, to present new ideas, to have their work be part of the team in such a way that doesn't bring the stress of potential retribution or humiliation or any negative side effects. If we think about the basics of teams and how the team interacts, how the team members interact, and how the team contributes as a whole through the individual contributions of each team member, it's absolutely critical that psychological safety is the basis, the foundation of how that team works. We can take this beyond just the ability or feeling safe enough to contribute or to ask questions or to ask for help or clarification. We can take that one step beyond that. When it comes to teams especially, it's important that individual team members feel respected and valued in their contributions, regardless if that contribution is simply the work that was assigned to that person, or a new idea, or the request for clarification. There has to be that feeling that the individual is accepted and respected to interact with the group in any way that they need to. When it comes to psychological safety, creating an environment that allows and promotes and fosters psychological safety is absolutely critical. This is where the organization, this is where the employer comes in. We know by now, if you've been listening to me or paying attention at all, you know that the organization and its leadership will definitely have an impact and an effect on the organization's culture and its environment. It is this environment that will either foster and allow psychological safety, or it will deter it and put an end to it before it really has an opportunity to take hold. So absolutely, employers have a tremendous responsibility. Having said that, let's not forget that the responsibility does not start and end with the employer, but rather every single individual within the organization has multiple opportunities and certainly the responsibility to create the kind of environment, immediate environment and corporate environment, that promotes and allows psychological safety. You've probably heard the phrase that suggests if you want a better world, then do what it takes to create that world. If you want to see certain results, then contribute to the whole in such a way that will bring those results about. This is not a new concept. You've probably heard it in one way or another, but this is just a great demonstration on how individuals have just as much power and just as much responsibility to make sure that psychological safety is the norm, that it is the work environment experience for not only for themselves, but also for their colleagues. One way to help create psychological safety at the workplace is to create trust within the organization, to create the kind of culture where trust is the norm rather than the kind of culture where trust is the exception, and instead mistrust and lies and suspicions and maybe backstabbing are the norm. So every organization has the opportunity and the responsibility to take care of that environment, and that environment, of course, includes organizational culture. Open communications are key. I cannot stress enough the importance of communications within a company. And again, this is something that falls both on the employer, but also on the individuals within the organization. It can take as little as 1 or 2 people to ruin it for everyone else. So despite everybody else's efforts, if, for example, communications are stifled at some turn, at some point, then that may very well affect a much bigger population within the organization than may be obvious or that one may suspect. So open and honest communication are absolutely key here. The other thing that's important to consider is being able to take certain risks, whether that risk means presenting a new idea, whether that risk means asking for clarification when everybody else seems to understand but you don't. So again, a company has the responsibility and the opportunity to create the kind of environment where risk-taking of all kinds is not only allowed, but it's also promoted and supported. Imagine a company that relies on innovation, but at the same time frowns upon risk-taking or discourages risk-taking by punishing those who take risks and fail in the company's eyes. So it's not difficult to see why the organization absolutely has to allow for risk-taking as part of that work environment and work experience. And of course, wherever there is risk-taking, or simply whenever there are interactions between people, there will always be a possibility of mistakes and failures. This is where the organization has a tremendous opportunity and, of course, responsibility to ensure that when mistakes happen, and they will, they are handled properly. They are handled as learning opportunities, opportunities for improvement, opportunities for innovation. After all, if we're looking to include risk-taking as part of the organization for one reason or another, we have to allow for potential failures and the opportunity to learn and grow from those failures. Just as individual employees have an opportunity to join forces with the organization as far as promoting psychological safety and creating the kind of environment that results in psychological safety, so too do managers and leaders. Each has a unique opportunity and a unique role in getting on board in terms of promoting psychological safety. Leaders and managers who are known for leading by example, who are known for their integrity and honesty, are the kinds of leaders that will inspire the same from their employees. In recent years, the idea of vulnerability has become a big one. Well, this is also something that applies when we consider psychological safety. When a company, when an organization has leaders and managers who are willing to be vulnerable in front of the workforce, in front of the staff, and who are willing to be humble and able to learn from mistakes, in addition to supporting things such as psychological safety and risk-taking, those individuals can move the organization forward and tip the scale of psychological safety at that organization into a more favorable area, into the green, if you will. And of course, when we consider leaders and managers, communication is huge on that individual level. Listening to their employees, supporting them, mentoring them, allowing for honest and open communications, conversations that have meaning, that are helpful. All of that can add up to a tremendous wave of support for psychological safety. It is through those one-on-one experiences or those daily experiences, maybe exchanges between a team and their manager or leader, that psychological safety is built one brick at a time. If you're going to create the kind of environment that supports risk-taking, whether we're talking on an organizational level or as leader and manager individuals, you absolutely have to be there to support your people, to support your team when things go wrong, because it's inevitable. Sometimes things will go wrong. Sometimes there will be misses or failures. It's critical that management and leadership absolutely find ways to support their workforce in such ways that promotes psychological safety. It is no surprise that psychological safety comes with many benefits. Some of those, of course, include things such as retention, higher retention rates, higher reported job satisfaction, more motivation, better completed tasks or work that is completed faster, quicker, and with more accuracy. Psychological safety also leads to collaboration. And when we consider collaboration, whether we're looking at a set team or we're looking at two or more individuals within the organization coming together to brainstorm on new ideas or new solutions or solving problems, it can be tremendous to promote that kind of psychological safety on this different level in terms of leaders and managers and, of course, individual employees. As the week unfolds, let's take a look at psychological safety and its importance within the organization. Nothing could be more valuable than psychological safety at work, especially when it comes to teams. Feeling a sense of psychological safety means being able to contribute, being able to stand out, being able to ask questions, being able to ask for help, and so much more in such a way where a person doesn't worry about being humiliated or any kind of retribution or any kind of negative effects of whatever it is that they do. This is just as important in our personal lives as it is in our professional lives. And of course, as we think in terms of teams, there has to be a certain respect, a certain way of upholding one another so that team members can contribute freely in many different ways, from asking about a task or clarification for what needs to be done to asking another team member or perhaps asking the manager what can be done and how it can be done better, more efficiently. This is why psychological safety, while it can be seen as something that benefits a single individual, truly is connected to multiple people all at once. I encourage you to think about psychological safety in your own experience. What does psychological safety mean to you? How is it reflected in your life, in your personal life, in your work life? Are you someone who is in a position to foster and promote psychological safety? And if you listen to today's episode, you know that you are, no matter what your position within the organization and what you do. So ask yourself, are you someone who can contribute in new and better ways to ensure psychological safety for others' benefits, which will benefit you as well in the long term? But also think about psychological safety in terms of your own experiences. Is this something that you visit or experience regularly, or is it something that's a once in a blue moon occurrence at best? And consider what you can do to start making those changes. For those of you who experience this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, where you can find the video version of this very podcast. In addition to the podcast, my YouTube channel, Stress Free with Dr. G, also contains videos that focus on stress management. So I highly recommend you check it out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.